Hello and welcome everyone, it's me, TheLaval, also known as the Power Tool Duelist, back for you with another episode of Straight Out of the Toolbox. And today we are getting royal because we are going to be talking about Monarchs. As mentioned in the video talking about the ban list, I really, in general, found Monarchs very interesting, but since Pantheism is now back at 3, I really went about, built the deck and had a lot of fun with it. So let's get into it and see what Monarchs are all about. Starting off, the main deck for my current list are 3 Erebus, the Underworld Monarch. You can, just like many of the bigger Monarchs, tribute them also by tributing 1 tribute summoned monster. So I won't mention that anymore. And if he is tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spells and traps with different names from your hand or deck to the grave. And if you do, shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand at random, graveyard, or the other side of the field into that deck. And once per turn during either player's main phase, if this card's in your graveyard, you can discard a Monarch spell or trap and then target 1 monster in your graveyard with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense added to your hand. Basically the normal Monarch stat line. He's kinda cool. Making him turn 1, looping 1 card of your opponent's hand is neat. If you're also able to domain lock your opponent that turn. So he is one of your better first turn plays. Then I played 2 Kaios the Mega Monarch. As mentioned, I do have kind of a bias for Caius. So he's here, as mentioned, can be tribute summoned by tributing 1 tribute summoned monster. And if he's tribute summoned, target a card on the field, he gets banished, and if you do inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. If it was a dark monster, you banish all cards with that name from main, hand, main, and extra deck, and graveyard of the player who controlled it. And if he was tributed by tributing a dark monster, you can target 2 cards instead. He's neat, gets a good amount of removal in. Dark is a rather prevalent attribute, so I think he's neat. Also, he's Kaios Mega Form, so he gets a bonus. Then we have 3 Ether, the Heavenly Monarch. If he's tribute summoned, you can send 2 Monarch spells traps with different names from your hand and or deck to the graveyard, and if you do special summon 1 monster with 2400 or more attack and 1000 defense from your deck, but return to the hand during the end phase and during your opponent's main phase. If he's in your hand, you can banish a Monarch spell and trap from your graveyard, and immediately after this effect resolves, tribute summon him, which is a quick effect. He makes your main form of interruption. Flipping, Stormforth, chaining his effect, maybe banishing the Stormforth to tribute summon him. Not chaining, but resolving Stormforth and afterwards activating him to tribute 1 of your opponent's monsters is one of your main ways of interruption. Because the deck really does not do a whole lot on your opponent's turn. Most of your effects are on summon, so you really can't do a lot there. But in general, he's really cool. Also, special summoning out Caius from the deck is rather neat. Then I play 1 Mobius, the Frost Monarch. When tribute summoned, target up to 2 spell and traps on the field. Both get destroyed. He's neat. Just some back row removal. I kinda like it, so I just run 1 Mobius. Then 2 Caius. As mentioned, I do have kind of a bias here, but if he's tribute summoned, target a card on the field, target gets banished, and if you do, inflict 1000 damage if it was a dark monster. Which is cool. It's neat. Then we have 1 Caius the Light Monarch. This is your second way to interrupt your opponent, because on summon, or normal or special summon, you can target up to 2 cards on the field. Those targets get destroyed, and if you do, each player draws a card for each card they control that was destroyed by this effect. Cannot attack during the turn. It's normal or special summoned. Main play being, you make Ether, or you summon Ether on your opponent's turn, you summon out Caius, and then basically either pop 1 or pop 2. It is neat, but I really don't like that Caius lets your opponent draw cards. Because if you do this during your opponent's turn, he's most likely going to draw into cards, which further let him into place. So I just run 1 Caius. Yeah. Then we have 2 Mithra, the Thunder Vessel. If she's in your hand, you can activate this effect. You can not special summon monster from the extra deck this turn, but you can also special summon her and give your opponent a Vessel token on their field. If she is tributed for a tribute summon, you can activate this effect, you can also tribute summon one monster during your main phase this turn, in addition to your normal summon, or set this turn. Both effects are once per turn. She's neat because she gets herself easily on the board, and the token you give to your opponent is most likely not going to be a problem because you have great ways of removal, or otherwise just you can just beat over it. So, because that's kind of the point of Monarchs. After they hit their field, they just punch really hard. Then we have 3 Idas, the Underworld Squire. If he's normal or special summoned during your main phase, you can tribute summon one monster in addition to your normal summon or set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. Also, you can banish him from your graveyard and target a monster with 800 attack and 1000 defense. Basically, almost all the vessels or squires, except Idas, and special summon it in defense. Also, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. He's neat. On normal summon, he fetches you... Yes, he's basically something you fetch off yugioh, so you can go into one of your bigger monarchs if you don't have domain to reduce the level. So he's neat. Also, the recursion effect is really helpful. Then we have 3 yugioh, the Heavenly Squire. On normal summon or special summon, you can special summon a monster with the vessel's stat line from your deck in defense, except yugioh herself. And also, you cannot special summon monster from the extra deck for this turn. If she is sent to the graveyard, you can target one of your banished Monarch spells and traps, add it to your hand. Both effects hard once per turn. Great. Also, what's great about yugioh, it's a 1-for-1 target. So, you run one of that. Yeah, basically fetches Idos, fetches another vessel, gets your tribute further on the board, is not only a 1-for-1 target, but also a roller target. So, she's great. And just 1-for-1 for fetching yugioh. It's your 4th copy. Then we have, finally back at 3, Pantheism of the Monarchs. Send a Monarch spell and trap from your hand to the graveyard and draw 2 cards. And you can banish this card from the graveyard, reveal 3 Monarch spells and traps from your deck. Your opponent chooses one at random. No, not at random, but he chooses one of those cards, but if you show him 3, it does not matter. And you shuffle the rest back into the deck. You can only use the graveyard effect of Pantheism of the Monarchs once per turn, which means you can resolve the draw effect and instantly search, which is neat. So yeah, Pantheism back at 3 definitely helps the deck out a lot. Of course, searching your spells and traps, which are really powerful in some cases, is very nice, and also being able to not only just maybe dump a spare Monarch spell you have in hand to fix your hand is also very neat. Then just 1 Rotor, fetches yugioh, so it's your 5th copy. Then we have 3 Tenacity of the Monarchs. You basically reveal a Monarch in your hand, and add a Monarch spell and trap from your deck to your hand, except Tenacity of the Monarchs. It's a great card. It basically fetches your entire spell lineup, just something which is very neat. Then we have the 1 Terraforming to fetch your domain. Then we have 3 The Monarchs Stormforth. Once during this turn, if you would tribute summon a monster, you can tribute one monster your opponent controls, even though you do not control it. As mentioned, flipping this on your opponent's turn, letting it resolve, and then tribute summoning an ether over something your opponent needs, or maybe over a bigger monster, is one of your main ways of interruption. So it's really neat for that. Then we have 2 March of the Monarchs. Tribute summon monsters you control cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects, but it locks you out of the extra deck, but you don't run an extra deck anyways. Really cool card, gives your Monarchs that extra bit of protection that they really need sometimes, because this deck, it's a bunch of bricks, and if you throw a brick at your opponent, sometimes you're gonna hit, and it's gonna hurt. But it won't always work. So March definitely helps your Monarchs to remain more oppressive on the field, because these guys are kinda big, and especially with domain, they can reach some good attack numbers when they're attacking. But yeah, then I just play 1 return, can special summon monsters from the extra deck, but when you tribute summon a monster, you can basically add 1 Monarch from your deck to your hand, because both are the Monarch stat lines, but you have some other targets, which I'll talk about later. Then we have 3 Domain of the True Monarchs. While you have no cards in your extra deck and you are the only player that controls a tribute summoned monster, your opponent cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck. This card could have probably only have had this effect text and it would still be as amazing for the deck as it is. But if a tribute summoned monster you control attacks an opponent's monster, it also gains 800 during damage calc. And once per turn you can reduce the level of one monster with 2800 and 1000 defense, which is basically the big Monarch stat line, by 2. So you can basically pump out your Ether, Mega Monarchs, or your Erebus for tribute less, which is really neat. Then just capping off the main deck are 2 the Prime Monarch. Once per turn you can target 2 Monarch spells and traps in your graveyard, shuffle them into the deck and draw 1 card. And if this card is in your graveyard, you can banish one other Monarch spell and trap, special summon this card in defense as a normal monster, Fairy Light, level 5, attack 1000, defense 2400. It's not treated as a trap, which is neat. But yeah, gets you more tribute further on the board. You mostly mill this off Ethers and Erebus effect. So yeah. Extra deck, we don't have to talk about anything because you don't run an extra deck with this, which is interesting and very unique, I think. Then just going into the side deck, you can of course incorporate other Monarchs, other Mega Monarchs, other normal Monarchs. I feel like with that you're kind of flexible and can really look into what do you think are maybe the coolest looking, what Monarchs have the most interesting effects for you, and you can definitely try and run those. Something else that exists and that has the Monarch stat line is Majesty's Fiend. He's searchable by a lot of your cards. He's searchable by return, he is basically something you can reveal for tenacity, and he is something you can summon off Ether. And locking your opponent out of monster effects on their turn is really toxic, but it's also good. So he is definitely something that you can consider if you wanna maybe make Monarchs more competitive. And if you want to, you can also run a more trap heavy build, maybe with escalation, which lets you tribute summon on your opponent's main phase and battle phase. If you really wanna just pump out those Monarchs on his turn, or just use the Monarchs Erupt and basically lock your opponent out of playing the game. So yeah, you definitely can take this into a more stun heavy direction, but I felt like I wanted to just focus on domain locking and that's it. But this will be it for the profile, and I will see you guys in the field. So this time I'm using the replay tool for this part of the video, so I have more time to just talk about the plays. You saw me here just resolving tenacity, grabbing Pantheism, drawing into my domain, which set up my graveyard with a prime. Waiting here for him to play because I want to use Ether's effect to now banish tenacity, tribute summon him. Idea will grab back that tenacity. So I banish to summon the Caius, tribute both of his monsters. He will just book my Caius, but it is not going to do much. Now I'll just flip back up the Caius, activate the tenacity, grabbing return, getting Idea back with Idol's graveyard effect, so I can get another Idol's out of my deck and get Erebus onto the field. Just to grab Caius, Erebus will get that face down from the board. Kaios effect sadly is mandatory, but as you can see, I just took a very quick game here. And yeah, this is something that if your opponent does not properly side against Monarchs, he can definitely run into some problems. But looking at the second replay here, which is also, I think, something that went very smoothly, and I am very happy that in both games I did not break. But in general, I feel like I am not that susceptible to bricking with Monarchs. Just activating the Stormforth here so I can Idea on the Linkslayer activation, getting rid of Idea, and the Link Slayer, Idio's effect will grab me back my Tenacity, and Ether will summon out Erebus from the deck, just so I have him as well. Prime Monarch triggering here, getting out on the board as a monster. He will make a Decode Talker and crash into Ether, but that will leave him with nothing left on the field. Activating Tenacity here to grab March, Pantheism to grab Return, which I'll use to Erebus, grab a Ether, shuffling a card from his hand back, summoning Idea. Idea will get another Eidos out onto the board, tributing the Idea. Kaios, of course, being mandatory. Idea adding back domain. Kaios has to banish Erebus, but at least it burns for 1,000. Dropping the domain on him, so he does not have access to his extra deck anymore. And now I basically, again, have him right where I want him. He cannot really out my Monarchs in any great way without dropping a Feather Duster on me. But yeah, now summoning out the Curious, using that effect, pop his monster, which is basically going to end the duel here. But yeah, this is basically Monarchs. You most likely want to domain lock your opponent first turn. If you play a more floodgate heavy version with the Monarchs Erupt, you want to get that up, but that is something up to preference. I usually do not enjoy stun decks, but Monarchs are kind of a different story because they do hit rather hard, as you saw in those games. But yeah, Harpy's Feather Duster is the bane of your existence, but you can always hope your opponent doesn't draw it. But that will be it for this video. I will thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time. But until then, goodbye.